All right, hey traders, this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, July 30th. So we've got one more day of July, and then we're on to August. Just to go over some of the names that reported after the close, we'll start with Apple. Keep in mind, I go over all these names for members. We on days like this, we open up the room right after the close, and we go through the names live. So this will be just a quick review because, like I said, I already went over all these names. We do them live. That's why you don't see me tweet out the results because we go ahead and pack the room with what we're doing in terms of names that are reporting after the close. I go through them all live. But just so in case you haven't seen much on Apple yet, the main story: Apple projected revenue in the current quarter that topped analyst estimates, signaling the company's optimistic about potential sales for the new iPhone models. It looks like Tim Cook also put out a quote saying that he's optimistic for some new models that are coming out at some point. So a little bit of a teaser, I guess, for what their new products are going to be. So that always helps. Then just going through the numbers, it looks like some of the wearables, the watch, the wearables have now surpassed the iPad. But here's some more numbers in case you want to go through at your own time. Now tops, here it is, the Apple Watch wearables category now topped the iPad. But some of these numbers, I think the only thing that wasn't stellar, and again, this is versus analyst estimates, which, I don't give that too much credence, but I think the iPhone sales were a little bit light versus the analyst expectations. But overall, I think here that is right here. But overall, these numbers were really pretty hot and impressive, right? So whenever if I'm going over a name that I did or did not play for earnings, something like this, Apple, I did not play for earnings. But, I think this is just overall pretty good for the market, right? You don't want to see something like them come out and say that some area of the market is really weak. I think they said, and I hope I'm quoting this correctly, but 59% of their sales are coming from non-U.S., which I thought was a little bit higher than the normal. But here it is: 61 to 64 billion is the revenue estimates. Whew, that's a lot of money. And there's more and more that you could, I guess, break down here. iPhone sales and so forth. But again, they're probably going to be coming out with a new iPhone that's going to set the bar, not the previous iPhone at this point. All right, so that's Apple. I'll go through some of the other names really quickly. Stick with the A's. Akamai threw up a little bit. Amgen. Amgen seems to do this every quarter. We were talking about this in the trading room just a few minutes ago, that Amgen will have some pops on earnings and then kind of gets faded. Sticking with healthcare, Gilead is now down. Going over to some software names, Paycom, real nice move there, up to 241. Zen, which is another name, is essentially flat. I think their numbers were fine. I think Zen is a great name to kind of own rather than trade options because it just doesn't move that much. But the trajectory is definitely up, and you could basically use a 50-day moving average as your stop in this name. AMD. AMD, I thought the numbers were decent. They're down a little bit. Watch for buyers to kind of come back into this name. Keep in mind, for most of these names for most of the semi names, the numbers haven't been wonderful. So, half of their numbers were in line. For AMD, I did not think that was that bad. But we'll see if buyers kind of come in. And I've been saying this, especially this quarter. If you think, or if these are names that you really like for the long term, the beauty about, I think, this quarter is we're seeing a lot of initial moves down, and then the name recovers. So I would keep that in mind for AMD. Again, none of these earnings calls I don't think have started yet, but that's what AMD is doing. ENPH, this is a solar name that we saw a lot of call buying about 2 weeks ago. This name's up to 24.8. So again, a lot of movers. I'm missing some of them, but I think that's enough for today. Just to summarize today's price action, and I'll keep it brief. But overall, I think we still have got a lot of events for the week to get through. We get FOMC tomorrow, but it's funny how when the market starts down on the day, that it entices buyers to kind of come out. I had a question earlier from a reporter, and they were just asking me for a quote. And they were like, "Why is the market, why hasn't it moved up this morning?" And I'm like, "Well, it's just kind of how it's been working lately. When the market starts up 20 or 30 basis points, when we come in the morning and futures are up 20 or 30 basis points, we're more inclined, not always, but for sellers to kind of come in and knock down the market. When the market opens up down a 0.5%, or a little bit more than that, it gets the buyers thinking that they're getting something on a discount. Oh, I could get something for down 0.75%. So I think that has something to do with it. It's a lot of investor psychology, in my opinion, from when we start the day up 30 or 40 basis points versus when we come in and we start the day down 0.75% to 0.5%. Usually buyers come in, unless there's some really bad news on the tape. Let me go through sectors really quick. Well, before I do that, here's what the Qs did for today. There's still, I don't think we've come out of, on the 1 hour bar, the one negative here is we've slipped into value for the week. So again, we'll see, probably we're going to go one way or another. I don't think that's a pretty, uh, that's a pretty, crazy speculative statement to say that we're going to go one way or another. But I think the Fed will be the catalyst for tomorrow. All right, so that is the Qs. The real story, I think, for the day, and I'm glad because I traded this one and added to my position, is IWM. Look at what IWM did today, up 1.1%. So really nice to see that lead. Look at the last bar of the day too. So right from the start of the day, this got going, and I added to. When did I put my position on? And this was an add to my position. This was at 10 o'clock, so I waited a half hour. So right in here, and look at that. So looking at the chart here in IWM, this gets me really excited. Just as I said, I was excited last week, and we've had some crazy back and forth moves in IWM, but it's leaning to the upside. And if you look at mid caps, which I know not a lot of people look at, or look at every day, I should say, mid caps are leaning to the upside. The only thing I don't like about the mid cap, you've got a virgin point of control up here, 371, which is $10 away, which you could certainly shoot for in a swing trade. But we're going to be hitting resistance on the weekly chart for the mid cap ETF. IWC, if you turn it around and go the other way and look at the micro caps, this looks like it's got a lot more road in front of it if it can get out of the range. And IWEC is trying to do that. This is one of the areas that I'm really kind of itching to go long, is the microcaps. I just don't really want to do it in front of the Fed. But I think there's plenty of upside, even if it does jump another couple percent. I won't be upset if I miss that because it will be moving outside of a range. So that, I think, is one of the most notable things of the day, besides obviously all the earnings reports that we're getting. You can see on my spreadsheet percentage change from open. IWM actually finished up 1% on the day, but from low to high up 1.8%. This was the other story, and I tweeted this out saying, hey, what's going on with energy stocks? Now, of course, there could just be a little bit of a squeeze, but man, OIH up 6.3% from the open, 4% for the day. Now, if you look at these charts, it's really not that impressive, other than the fact that, maybe a little bit of a squeeze going on here for the day. XOP was up 5% of the day. Now, I will tell you, any of these rallies that have occurred. Now, this one looks a little bit different. This is a big day for XOP, which is the equally weighted oil and gas ETF. But usually the rallies get faded, and that's what usually happens in a downtrend, which is what these energy stocks are in. FCG was another one that I was watching. This is just straight nat gas companies. This was also up 6.3% for the day. So again, big move if you caught it. I had some people, of course, I asked the Twitter sphere what they thought was going on with energy stocks, and people were saying, buy the dip for the most part. And I'm like, okay, well, they've been in a downtrend for a couple of years. So you're saying every time they've gone down, you've bought the dip? Okay. I don't know. I think people are being sarcastic with me, which is quite fine. Also, the banks look at and biotech. Biotech got going right from the beginning of the day. biotech was pretty strong. And this looks like it's kind of coiled up here a little bit, the biotech ETF. This thing has been very difficult the last couple months. Since I was on Bloomberg and I called going long biotech, it's done nothing. Which I think was over here, some place probably back here. But sometimes you just have to ignore the past. Maybe wait for an MACD crossover, but you still have this $92 VPOC that's sitting up here that could eventually act as a magnet. Wow, Apple's still going here. Whew. Just to kind of finish up here, but again, most names they rallied. The only ones that did not do well after the open were some of the defensives. So this was kind of a risk on tape. The banks, I've been talking about the banks and small caps a lot the last couple of days. This KRE is pushing again. I still like Goldman. I think Goldman, after a couple of days of consolidation, I think wants more. And I do not have a position on Goldman, but you've got a really decent value area to play, for longer term, right? I'm on the weekly chart, so of course not looking at, you know, a front month option position. I would be looking at a long term trade to try to see if this thing get up to 260, top of value. Another name that I would rather be in is Ally Financial, right? We've had earnings in Ally, that's done. This name popped pretty nicely on earnings. I was in a position. I sold my last position on earnings day, but I'm kind of looking to get back into it. I wanted to see how this thing would settle in after about a week, and it looks strong. And I think that's best to read in the group. USB was another name that was going up pretty nicely and is still going. So there's definitely pockets of strength. Before I forget, one tidbit on small caps. I think they've had the biggest monthly inflows of 2019, if I heard that correctly. I know that some names in the financials, before I go on to another quick subject, this IYG had a nice inflow the other day. This is financial services. So you've got credit card companies as well as exchanges lumped in with banks in this ETF if you don't want all that bank exposure. I actually like the weighting of that a little bit better, but nice inflow in that ETF the other day. Industrial did very well as well. So I think we covered most of the groups. Fang stocks, the name that we talked about, and I sent out our pre-market. Every day we do a pre-market session where I go over like all the overnight moves, not just in the U.S. but international. I go over all the commodity moves, and one of the names that I talked about was Facebook, that I thought could see a nice bounce. I don't think it closed on its highs, but certainly got a nice bounce after 1, 2, 3 red days. Software names again were mixed, depending on which one you held, but some things kind of gave back early bounces. Again, the bank's very strong. All right, we'll leave it there. We've got plenty to go over for tomorrow. Again, very event-driven week. Cannot wait till it's over. Cannot wait till Thursday, right? We've got basically our member appreciation Tribeca Trade Group meetup on Thursday night. Very excited. And we've got a nice spot reserved on the water in Midtown. So looking forward to that very much, guys. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.